You're listening to part one of a new Island Life series, drawing on the rich variety of material in the Manx Radio archives.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Fast am I, and welcome to the Archive Room. Come and join me, Judith Lay, as we revisit some broadcasting gems, memories, thoughts and stories of island life told by the people who were there. Tonight we're reviewing the evidence for, or maybe against, the Dalby Spook. Did the talking, or was it singing, mongoose really live with Mr. and Mrs. Irving and their daughter Vorry at Dúlash Cashan in the 1930s? His voice seemingly coming from the rafters of the house. Did he really leave rabbits and other tokens at the door of their little farmhouse in the remote Dalby countryside? The late David Callister, with his skilled and gentle interview style, was a master at uncovering stories. And tonight we're going to hear David in conversation with Alec Karran, Reggie Bell, Corlett and Kathleen Green, all local people with strong links to both the Dalby area and the legend of Jeff the Mongoose. Here's David talking with Alec Karran, who lived all his life in Glenmay and went to school with Mr. and Mrs. Irving's daughter Vorry.
The first recollection I've got of Mr. and Mrs. Irving was coming in to see Mother in the little cafe in the middle of the hill. Mrs. Irving was a tall woman, good-looking woman. Mr. Irving wasn't quite so good-looking. Vorry, the daughter, they were all living at Dúlash Cashan, but Mr. and Mrs. Irving used to come into the cafe, and she was known as Mrs. Do you follow me? Because she would tell you a yarn, and she used to say, well, do you follow me? So they christened her Mrs. Do you follow me? When the Dalby Spook broke out...
How did it come about, that? How did the story get around?
Well, I suppose that in the first instance, Mr. and Mrs. Irving would be pushing this thing, and the media got a hold of it.
Yes.
As the thing progressed, there was a lot of influential people. A fellow named Lambert was put in prison in London for it.
Yes.
For defamation of character. All these respected people used to come over here and stop in Homely House here. And they used to trek up there at night time.
And what were they supposed to see when they got there?
Well, they didn't see anything. Only the talking mongoose.
Yeah.
There was nothing. It was only Vorry throwing a voice, that's all it was. I guarantee that's all it was. I mean to say, my guarantee may not be much, but it was that all it was.
Did you ever get to know Vorry yourself?
Vorry?
Yeah.
I went to school with Vorry.
Yeah.
And she was just an ordinary girl.
Was there any evidence of her throwing her voice at school or anything?
No, none whatsoever. Just an ordinary girl. But you see, Mr. and Mrs. Irving struck on the idea, that's only my knowledge of it, struck on the idea that they could make a pound or two out of it, you see. And Jeff, the Dalby Spook,
yes,
he was bringing rabbits to the door. This was all coming out when Mr. and Mrs. Irving were talking to my mother in the cafe.
yes.
So it was struck on as a money-making proposition, I would think.
An old farmer once told me that Mr. Irving had come back from, I think, America or somewhere, a foreign location, and brought several mongoose with him.
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
So there's ever been no evidence do you know of a mongoose actually being about?
Oh, no. None whatsoever. None whatsoever. But, however, it got very much media publication.
Yeah.
And as I say, those influential people used to come and stop with Mr. and Mrs. Brighton here and trek up at night time about a couple of miles up the rugged road and sit in the house and listen to Vorry throwing a voice. And when Mr. and Mrs. Irving died, I don't know exactly where they died now. And Vorry, she went and drugged us to live.
The media interest has continued with this story right through all these years. Even up to now, people are still interested in this story.
Oh, yes. We had a book here. It was interesting reading about the Dalby Spook. But it's only the media that was blowing up.
What could the Irvings have got out of it, though?
Publicity.
But why did they need it? Why did they want publicity?
Well, I wouldn't know.
Well, that was Dalby Spook, a stone-built house, presumably.
Oh, yes,
is there anything of it left now?
Nothing at all left now. Well, I haven't been up for some years, but they tell me that there's nothing left of the house whatsoever. You would hardly know there's a house there.
And down here in the village then, the whole story was regarded as something of a joke, was it?
Yes, definitely. Something as a joke.
Well, a very definite verdict there from lifelong resident of Glenmay, Alec Karran. Mr. Karran was very sure that the Irvings enjoyed, indeed encouraged, the publicity, the media attention. But in fact it was a local man who was the first to get the story into print. He was Reggie Bell, born in 1908 and working on the Peel Guardian in the early 1930s when the Dalby Spook story was at its height.
Well, what I remember most of all is the journey from Glenmay up to the farm.
Dalby
Spook. It was a full moon, and there was 4 of us from Peel, well-known characters. Joe Gale, he had a car, and he drove us to Glenmay. Then there was Jack Moore, he was the sub-postmaster in Peel. And then Clucas Crellin was the 3rd. I don't know, do you know him or not, but he was
a teacher.
Teacher at the high school,
Right.
and a bit of a golfer. And he's a next-door neighbour too.
So you set off up the hill then?
I'd never been up there before, and the only person who'd been up was Jack Moore when he had been a telegraph boy delivering odd telegrams.
What was the house itself like then? Stone built?
Yes, what you might call a typical Manx farmhouse, a small farmhouse.
Yeah.
But the exciting part of the night was the house at the back sloped back to the ground. The front was normal, but at the back, you could step from the earth with one step and you were on the roof kind of thing. So Clucas Crellin got up on the roof that night and they had the doormat and they put it over the top of the chimney. Well, that caused a creation. They wondered where the smoke was coming from, I think, at first. And then after that, he came out at the door shouting he would shoot us. And he had a shotgun in his arms.
Really?
Whether he would or not, but they were smoked out.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people there. There must have been 30 odd, I should think. Well, there was one lot from Castletown even. They'd come all out. They found their way up there, I don't know.
And were you standing outside the house or what?
Yes, like a yard in front of...
What, they'd gone to see the spook, had they?
Well, it's hard to see the spook or to hear about him, because the story was going round, really. People were talking about it, and nobody knew anything.
This would be in the 30s or earlier, would it?
1932, I should think, would it be.
Right. Had you just gone up to try and find out a bit, or had you just gone up for the fun of it?
Out of curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
Out of curiosity. Most interesting, climbing up from the Glenmay down in the dip, up to this place up in the hills.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have gone back and climbed it again, but I've never gone back, really.
Really?
No.
Did you go expecting to see this mongoose or not?
Well, I don't know whether we expected to see him, but we were kind of caught up in the background toward what was this thing that was going on running behind the eaves, isn't it?
That's right.
I think this girl from Irving's, I think she was going to Patrick's school at the time.
Vorry.
And I think she was spreading the information daily.
Yeah.
And the kids were taking it all home, and the parents were getting interested the same as what we were interested, because there were a lot of people there, really. I don't know what the object was. Mrs. Irving herself was a very smartly dressed lady. She used to walk into Peel. We lived in Glenfarber Road at that time, and because she came down from Patrick walking, all dressed up, very smart, and her boots were one mass of mud. I've never forgotten it.
Right. Well, it'd be pretty muddy up in the farm, I suppose.
Well, they're coming down the lane.
Down the lane, yes.
She would come down to Glenmay. She wouldn't go round there was a kind of a roadway up from further over in Dalby, but she'd be taking the shortest route.
Oh, still a long walk, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. But they had to come into Peel for groceries and shopping. And
did they run? What did they have? Was it a farm, the thing itself, or not?
I wouldn't say it was a farm really, because there's only one man and his wife and this girl.
Did they keep animals?
Well, I wouldn't like to say, but I presume they would have a cow, wouldn't they?
Ah,
Or maybe more.
yeah,
But they had it was supposed to be a little bit of a farm.
yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know how you would make a living otherwise.
This crowd then would be disappointed, presumably, wouldn't they?
I don't know about disappointment, but they're all excited when he came at the front door with the gun. I'll shoot you. So anyway, somebody went up and pulled the mat away, and the smoke went up, and
Did they come out and say anything about this mongoose or not?
no, only to clear off, that was all.
That was it.
But people were going up continually after that. That was only one episode.
Of course.
I don't know what the other events occurred, but
Well, when did you write about it for the Peel Guardian?
that was to be about this time.
Yes.
That would be, say, March 32. I know it was a light night, and it was a full moon. We could see the roadway up. Otherwise, it would be in darkness.
Course.
We would never have found a way up, but it was a brilliant moonlight night.
Yeah. Your article then that went in the Peel Guardian, would you think that's the first time anyone wrote anything about it?
There was nothing in the Manx press from what I was aware of.
No.
Because if there would have been, Mr. Palmer would have had it in something in the news.
Yes.
He would have had to write something, but he hadn't.
You were working as a sort of junior reporter, were you?
No, I was a compositor.
Right.
Well, I used to write the football notes and things like that, but,
Yeah.
and an odd little bit, but I didn't do very much, really.
No. Did you ever meet Vorry?
I never spoke to her. I knew her by sight well enough, yes. But I didn't know him. I didn't know the father. I never remember him.
There was no idea then of how this could have started, because somebody that I spoke to a while back said they thought that the people who had occupied Dúlash Cashin before the Irvings had imported some animals from America.
Never heard that.
No.
No, never. I never heard of anybody being there before the Irvings, really.
After that, of course, there was interest from far and wide beyond the island, wasn't it?
It was worldwide, almost, wasn't it? There was always something appearing in some paper or other.
Yes.
It was a kind of an interesting story, really, if people could have got to the basic facts behind it. What was the object of doing this exercise? Why did she put this story around about speaking to somebody up in the rafters?
Yes. No, I've not spoken to anybody that could have even dreamt of a talking mongoose being there at all.
They didn't know what a mongoose was, did they? I didn't. I wouldn't know yet, really, what a mongoose was.
She gave it a name. She called it Jeff.
Jeff, I think it was, yes.
Did you ever read any of the books and articles afterwards that came out?
No, I never read any, no. Well, I'd seen it from the beginning, really, and heard all the stories. And after I left Palmer's, I was in the insurance business, and Dalby was part of my round.
Oh, was it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Did people often talk about it?
Well, not often, but if it cropped up, they would talk about it.
Yes.
Well, what they knew, I don't think they knew any more than what we knew, really.
No.
People in Peel.
It's really a sort of mystery, isn't it? I suppose?
It's a real, yes, it's something that you could talk about for long enough. And she must have had a gift for spreading this information.
They also said she could throw her voice as well.
Well, she must have been. Whether she was, I don't know. But the only man I ever remembered being in the house was Willie Kelly, the corn and seed merchant. He lived next door to us, actually, in Peel, but he had the business opposite the old railway station. Well, he had his stores there, and he went up the same night. How he got up, I don't know, but he went into the house. He was known. He must be one of his customers.
But I think they used to let reporters in, didn't they, and try and get something happening so that
I don't know what they could make. What could they make out of it? I mean, they weren't selling anything, were they?
I often ask this, what advantage did they have? It didn't bring them money, did it?
Well, I couldn't see any way. If you came over to the island as a visitor and I said, well, we go up to Dúlash Cashin and have a look round, There'd be nothing to see, really. It's only an old farmhouse.
Yes.
And there's no background to it, really.
Anyway, you didn't take it very seriously, did you?
No, I didn't. I don't think anybody did, really. But the girl, she had a peculiar, I don't know, she was gifted in telling stories, as you might say, because she used to spread the news in the school.
Yes.
And because the kiddies went home and said, something happened up at Doris Cash tonight, Barry is telling us, another tale.
Yes.
And they were all being stored up and talked about.
The pity of it is that Vorry never came out and really told us what it was about.
No, it's a pity she didn't make it public, really. It would have cleared up a lot of, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And given her a little bit of a standing too, that she could do this kind of thing.
That's right.
And get away with it.
Yeah.
Reggie Bell, the man who wasn't even a full-time journalist, yet wrote the very first newspaper report of the Dalby Spook. And whilst Mr. Bell says that, with the passing of Vorry Irving, the truth of Jeff the Mongoose can never really be known, the story lives on. Ian Corlett lived in the west of the island long after the mongoose had ceased to draw crowds to the remote Dalby farmhouse. But it was still a topic of conversation in his family. The Irvings were friends of Ian's great-grandfather, as both were from Scotland, and Ian remembers being taken by his uncle to visit the Irvings, although this was after the Dalby Spook story had died down. Still in search of answers, David Callister asked Ian Corlett if he'd any idea how the story had started.
My grandmother told me that Mr. Irving came down to me great-grandfather's farm at Ballaquain, and he said, "Willie, have you got a trap?" He said, "I've got a ferret or something." In the house, it was lined with a boarding, like a panelling. So he gave him a trap. Anyway, I think it was about a week or something after, they said he came down. He said, "Will you catch that polecat, whatever you had?" He said, "No, the blinking thing started to talk." So that's the first that I heard of it. Yeah. But then when I can remember as a boy, all these cars lined along the road, and I think the young chaps, young farmers down were playing jokes on them, stuffing potatoes up the exhaust pipes and things like that. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the local thought it was a bit of a hoax or something. None of them that I knew ever heard him, and I'd been up there for tea many times. I never heard him.
No, but they did say that Vorry was something of a ventriloquist.
Yeah, that's right. They did say that.
Well, there's no doubt that Vorry Irving is the key to this legend, with her gifts as a storyteller, giving the latest news of Jeff the Mongoose to her friends at Patrick's school. But did she have natural skills as a ventriloquist? Could she really throw her voice? Kathleen Green, who was born Kathleen Christian in Dalby in January 1912, shared some very definite views when she chatted some years ago with David Callister, beginning with her recollections of the Irving family and her own search for the Dalby Spook.
They were very nice people, very polite, and they did quite a good business with all this capers about the spook. They had people coming from London and all over the place to hear about the spook. And they would tell them all these tales about what the spook could do and what it couldn't do and all. And there was no such a thing.
What, a talking mongoose?
There was no such a thing. I'll tell you why we could prove it. When the mongoose was about, all the young people from Peel and over were coming up, fellas and girls. It was terrible fun. Every night when it was nice and fine, you all went up to see the spook. There was nothing there, only young people all fooling about, And
Did you go to see the spook?
Yes, regular.
And what happened in the house then? I mean, what were you supposed to see then?
I don't know what he was supposed to be like. Some were saying he was like a weasel, and some were saying he was a sort of a mongoose. I couldn't tell you what we're supposed to see.
You never saw a mongoose?
Oh, no. One night after it was all gone quiet, there were 3 girls of us decided we would go up and see what's the spook about. It was a lovely moonlight night. So we went from the bottom of Glenmay Hill up a little lane to the house. Now, you could climb up onto the roof easy enough, and we got up there. There wasn't a soul about, so we went round to the gable. There was a window in the gable of the house, So we listened in there, the three of us were listening in there. And the two women were in the house, Mrs. Irving and Borry. And they were thrown what looked like an ordinary tin box. And they were catching it, you know, it's making a big bang.
Yeah.
Then the other one was throwing it and she was catching it. And laughing, you know.
Yeah.
Having their own sort of fun, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next salute, we heard Mrs. Irving singing Jerusalem the Golden.
Yeah.
It's a hymn. It must have been me, I think, that laughed out loud. And we heard Vorry say, "Hush, mother, there's somebody about." So we three went straight away round, knocked at the door.
Yeah.
"We've come to see the spook." "Oh, he's just been out." "Oh, has he?" "Yes." Willie Quirk's sister was the talker. She said, "What was he doing?" "He was singing Jerusalem the Golden." Well, I was sitting up near the fire, it's a good job I was. And the other two girls were sitting further back. So we sat there, and we sat. And Mrs. Irving was sitting in a rocking chair, and she was pushing the rocking chair back and just touching the wall with it. And she said, "There he is, he's about enough."
Yeah.
And there's those three fools sitting there, you know. Then a bit later on, she'd push her foot along the line. "Oh, he's still about. Yes, he'll be out any time now." Well, we sat and we sat. And he didn't come. Vorry, she was with us, like, if she'd go out in the porch, maybe he'll come then, you know. But she went out, no, nothing at all. So we waited there for a good long time. And then we got fed up. We said, well, we better be going home. So we set off down the lane. And we were all walking single, because only a little narrow lane, you know. Wanda shouted, "Did you see her moving her feet?" "Yes, I did." "Did you see her doing something else?" "Yes, we did."
Yes.
The next salute we heard, "Good evening." This was Mr. Irving. He'd heard all the conversation. He was coming home.
Oh, he was coming the other way.
He was coming the other way, and he must have been hearing all our shouting, you know, because we were shouting to each other, you know,
Right.
all the way down. So that was left. So I said, well, that was proof enough that there was no such a thing. It was proof.
People have told me that Vorry used to throw her voice
She could.
as like a ventriloquist.
She could,
Yeah.
because I've heard her when she was going to school, throwing her voice up the field and shouting like a cat.
Really?
Yeah. And I know my cousin Anne said that she's been in the schoolyard and hearing voices coming out of the church, and she was terrified.
After you'd both grown up, and did you talk to Vorry when she was left school at all?
Well, he didn't ask her about the spook,
Why not?
because she was supposed to be seeing this thing in the hedges.
She believed in it, did she?
She was telling us to
She was
believe
telling
in it.
you to believe in it.
Yes,
Ah.
yes, yes.
So it was a big hoax, was it?
Oh, an absolute hoax. A good few years afterwards, there was 2 or 3 men came and they were staying at the Ballycallan Hotel and they were looking for the spook. So I was telling them about, you know, what I knew. They said, "Do you know where she lives?" I said, "No, I don't know where she lives at all, but I knew what town she was living in."
Yes.
And I told them. And they went and found her, and she was awful mad that I'd put her on to them, yes.
So she's never wanted to talk about it since, has she?
Oh no. She had her sister away, and she went away to look after her.
Thank you, Kathleen Green, Ian Corlett, Reggie Bell and Alec Karran. And of course, sincere thanks to the late David Callister. And my personal thanks to Manx Radio's archivist Tim Price, who's selecting the stories for this series. At this time next week, The Coffee Palace and Key Hobblers, The Parrot That Lived in the British Hotel and Keeping Cows in the Town. Intrigued? Join me at 6 next Thursday or subscribe and listen at your leisure to all the podcasts as they're available via manxradio.com. But that's all for now. This is Judith saying thank you for listening, and let's give the final word on the Dalby Spook to Kathleen Green. Does it really matter whether it was true or just a hoax?
Well, it lasted. It was really good fun, you know.
The nation station. station,